The gravel crunched beneath Devin Matthews' boots as he stepped out of his truck, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the overgrown field. His daughter Mia clutched his hand tightly, her small fingers wrapped around his calloused palm like a lifeline. She was only 7, but her eyes held the kind of knowing that came too early, the kind that followed loss. "Is this it, Daddy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind sweeping through the tall grass. Devin's chest tightened. This was it. Everything he had left. Every penny from his savings, every dollar from selling their old house, every sacrifice he'd made after Claire's death. It all led to this moment. 5 acres of abandoned land on the outskirts of town, with a dilapidated farmhouse that promised nothing but hard work and hope. "This is home, baby girl," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Or it will be. 3 months." That's how long it had been since he signed the papers, since he'd driven out here with blueprints and dreams, since he'd stood on this exact spot and envisioned a future. 3 months of working double shifts at the construction site to save enough money for materials. 3 months of planning, dreaming, and telling himself that this gamble would pay off. But as they walked closer to the house, something felt wrong. The windows. They weren't boarded up like they had been. Curtains, faded and yellowed, hung inside. And was that smoke? Devin's eyes shot to the chimney. A thin wisp of gray smoke curled into the sky. His heart hammered against his ribs. Someone was inside his house. "Mia, stay behind me," he said, his voice dropping to that protective register that made his daughter's eyes go wide. She nodded, pressing herself against his leg as they approached the front porch. The wooden steps groaned under his weight. The front door, his front door, the one he'd inspected with the realtor, the one that had been practically falling off its hinges, had been repaired. The handle turned easily in his grip. The door swung open. Warmth rushed out to meet them, carrying with it the smell of something cooking. Stew, maybe, or soup. The interior of the house glowed with soft lamplight. Furniture that hadn't been there before filled the space. A worn sofa, a small dining table, mismatched chairs. Pictures hung on walls he'd planned to tear down and rebuild. And there, in the center of the living room, stood 2 women. The older one was perhaps 70, her hair a crown of silver against dark skin that held the map of a hard life in every line and crease. She wore a simple floral dress and an apron dusted with flour. Her eyes, deep brown and unflinching, met Devin's with a mixture of surprise and something else. Resignation, maybe. Or defiance. The younger woman, maybe in her early 30s, stood protectively beside her. She was beautiful in a tired, worn-down way, with her mother's eyes and a posture that suggested she'd learned early how to make herself small, how to disappear when necessary. Her hand instinctively moved to her mother's shoulder. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the crackling of the fire in the fireplace and Mia's rapid breathing behind Devin's leg. "Who are you?" Devin finally managed, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing in my house?" The older woman straightened her spine, and despite her age, despite her circumstances, there was dignity in the gesture. "Your house?" Her voice was rough, like gravel smoothed by water, but steady. "This is my land, son. Has been for 40 years. Devin's mind reeled. The deed, the title, the lawyer. Everything had been checked, double-checked, verified. This land was his, legally purchased. The previous owner, some bank foreclosure, had been... "I bought this property 3 months ago," he said, pulling the folded deed from his jacket pocket with trembling fingers. Legally, through the county. It was abandoned. The bank foreclosed? Foreclosed, the old woman repeated, and something cracked in her voice. Yes, they did. She lowered herself slowly into one of the chairs, suddenly looking every bit her age. After my husband died, after the medical bills, after everything we built just crumbled. The younger woman, her daughter, knelt beside her. Mama, maybe we should... No, Naomi. The old woman's voice was firm. No more running. Devin stood frozen, the deed crinkling in his grip. This wasn't supposed to happen. He'd been so careful, so sure. This land was supposed to be his salvation, his second chance. His way of building something for Mia after her mother's death had torn their world apart. But looking at these two women, at the fear barely hidden behind the older one's fierce pride, at the protective way the daughter held her mother, Devin felt something shift inside his chest. What's your name? He asked quietly. Sarah, the old woman replied. Sarah Washington. And this is my daughter. Naomi. Mia peeked out from behind Devin's leg. Why are you living in our house? Sarah's eyes softened as she looked at the little girl. Because, sweetheart, we have nowhere else to go. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Devin's mind raced through options, through legal rights, through everything he'd worked for. He could call the police. He could demand they leave. This was his land, his deed, his future. But as he looked at Sarah's weathered hands folded in her lap, at Naomi's protective stance, at the life they'd clearly tried to rebuild in the ruins of what they'd lost, he couldn't move. How long? He asked. How long have you been living here? Sarah's gaze didn't waver. Since the foreclosure. 6 months. They took everything, but I couldn't leave. This is where I buried my husband. This is where I raised my daughter. This land. Her voice finally broke. This land is all I have left of him. Devin's throat constricted. He understood that kind of loss. That desperate need to hold on to something, anything, that connected you to the person who was gone. He'd felt it every day since Claire died. Every moment he looked at Mia and saw his wife's eyes staring back at him. Daddy? Mia tugged on his hand. What are we going to do? It was the question that would haunt him. The question that would force him to choose between the future he'd planned and the humanity he'd always tried to instill in his daughter. What would he do? Devin didn't sleep that night. He'd driven back to their cramped apartment in town, the temporary housing that was supposed to last only until the farmhouse was ready, with more questions than answers burning through his mind. Mia had fallen asleep in the truck, her small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. But Devin's thoughts were a hurricane. By the time the sun rose, he'd made a decision. He needed answers. The drive back to the property felt longer in daylight. The fields looked different now, not abandoned, but tended. Someone had been caring for this land. As he pulled up, he noticed details he'd missed in his shock the day before. A small vegetable garden near the side of the house, clothes hanging on a line, a patch of wildflowers growing where weeds should have been. Sarah was sitting on the porch when he arrived, a cup of something steaming in her hands. She didn't look surprised to see him. Figured you'd be back, she said simply. Coffee's on the stove if you want some. Devin climbed the steps slowly, his contractor's eye now seeing all the repairs that had been made. The porch boards had been reinforced. The railing, which had been rotted through, had been rebuilt. This wasn't squatting. This was homesteading. "Who fixed all this?" he asked, gesturing to the porch. "Naomi," Sarah replied with unmistakable pride. "My girl's got good hands. Learned from her father. Before the cancer took him, Marcus could fix anything." Her eyes drifted to the horizon. "He built this house with those hands. Every board, every nail. Took us 5 years, working whenever we could afford materials." Devin sat down on the top step, keeping a respectful distance. "The bank said this property had been abandoned for over a year." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Abandoned. That's what they call it when they take everything from you and don't bother to check if you're still breathing." She sipped her coffee. "Marcus got sick 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Aggressive. By the time they caught it, there was nothing to do but make him comfortable. The treatments we tried anyway, they cost everything. Sold our car, maxed out credit cards, put a second mortgage on the land." "I'm sorry," Devin said, and meant it. "Don't want your pity, son. Want you to understand." Sarah's voice hardened. "When Marcus died, I couldn't keep up with the payments. The bank didn't care about 40 years of on-time payments before that. Didn't care about the sweat and blood we'd poured into this place. They wanted their money, and when I couldn't give it to them, they took it all." The door opened, and Naomi stepped out, her eyes immediately finding Devin with a wariness that spoke of too many disappointments. She was dressed for work, jeans and a flannel shirt, work boots that had seen better days. "Mama, you don't have to explain ourselves to him," she said quietly. "Yes, I do." Sarah set down her cup. "Because he has every legal right to make us leave, and I'm hoping, praying, that if he knows our story, he might show us some mercy." Devin felt the weight of that hope like a physical thing. "The foreclosure notice," he said carefully. "You must have received eviction papers." Naomi's jaw clenched. "We did. Multiple times. But where were we supposed to go? I work 2 jobs and it's barely enough to feed us. Every apartment wants first month, last month. Security deposit, we're talking $3,000–4,000. You know how long it takes to save that when you're making minimum wage?" Her voice cracked. "This is our home. I was born in that bedroom." She pointed to a window on the 2nd floor. "My father died in that bedroom. You expect us to just walk away?" The silence that followed was heavy with years of injustice, of systems that failed people like Sarah and Naomi, of the impossible choices poverty forced on the desperate. "Why didn't you fight it?" Devin asked. "Get a lawyer?" Sarah's expression said everything. "With what money, son? We couldn't afford to keep the land. You think we could afford a lawyer?" Devin ran his hands through his hair, frustration and sympathy warring inside him. "I have a daughter. I lost my wife 2 years ago. Cancer, too. Breast cancer. She fought for 18 months, and I watched her slip away, piece by piece. When she died, I couldn't stay in that house. Couldn't sleep in our bed. Couldn't walk through rooms that still smelled like her." His voice roughened. "I sold everything. Took every penny I had, and bought this land because I thought I could build something new. Give my daughter a home where the memories weren't so heavy." For the first time, Naomi's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your wife." "And I'm sorry about your father," Devin replied. "About all of this, but I don't know what you expect me to do. I spent everything I have on this property. Everything. If I walk away, my daughter and I have nothing. And if you make us leave, Sarah said quietly, we have nothing too. The impossible choice crystallized in that moment. Two families, both destroyed by loss, both clinging to the same piece of land as their last hope for rebuilding. How did you even survive these past months? Devin asked. Living here without utilities? We have utilities, Naomi interrupted. I got them turned on in my name, paid every bill. We've been fixing up the house, maintaining the property. We're not squatters, Mr. Matthews. We're survivors. Devin looked at the two women, really looked at them. Sarah, who refused to abandon the only home she'd ever known. Naomi, who worked herself to exhaustion trying to protect her mother. They weren't victims waiting for rescue. They were fighters. I need time, he finally said. Time to think, to figure out what's right here. Sarah nodded slowly. That's all we're asking for. A little time, a little mercy. As Devin drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would define him, not just as a father trying to provide for his daughter, but as a man trying to hold on to his humanity in a world that often seemed designed to strip it away. What would he choose? His future or theirs? And was there any way both could survive? 3 days passed before Devin returned to the property. 3 days of sleepless nights, of spreadsheets that didn't add up, of looking at Mia's hopeful face and feeling his heart break a little more each time. He'd consulted with a lawyer, a free consultation he couldn't really afford, and learned what he already knew. Legally, he had every right to evict Sarah and Naomi. But legal and right weren't always the same thing. When he pulled up this time, Naomi was outside working on the old fence that bordered the property line. Her movements were efficient, practiced, measuring, cutting, hammering. She saw him, but didn't stop working, didn't acknowledge him beyond a brief glance. Devin got out of the truck and walked over, watching her work for a moment. Your father teach you that? Everything I know, she replied without looking up. He used to say that a person who can build and fix things will never be helpless. Guess he was wrong about that. The bitterness in her voice was earned, Devin thought. Can I help? Naomi finally looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. Why would you help me fix up property you're about to take from us? Maybe I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. She studied him for a long moment, then handed him a hammer. Hold this post steady. They worked in silence for a while, falling into an easy rhythm that came from mutual understanding of physical labor. Devin found himself respecting her skill, her attention to detail. This wasn't amateur work. Naomi knew what she was doing. How long have you been doing construction? He asked. Since I was 12. Used to help Dad on weekends and summers. He did odd jobs around town, repairs, renovations, whatever people needed. Never made much money, but he was proud of his work. She drove a nail home with 3 solid strikes. After he got sick, I took over some of his regular clients. That's one of my 2 jobs. The other's at the diner in town, overnight shift. Devin did the math in his head. When do you sleep? When I can. Naomi moved to the next section of fence. Mama needs her rest, especially since her arthritis got bad. Someone has to keep things going. The back door opened, and Sarah emerged with a tray bearing 2 glasses of lemonade and a plate of cookies. Despite everything, despite the uncertainty hanging over them, she'd still taken the time to be hospitable. Figured you boys could use some refreshment, she said, settling into a chair they'd placed in the shade. Can't have people working on my land without proper sustenance. Devin caught the deliberate emphasis on my land, but said nothing. He accepted the lemonade gratefully. The day had grown hot, and his shirt was already soaked with sweat. "These are good," he said, biting into a cookie. "Really good." Sarah's smile was genuine. "Old family recipe? My grandmother taught me when I was Naomi's age. She was a slave, you know. Born on a plantation not 50 miles from here. When she got free, she swore she'd own land someday. Took her whole life, but she did it. Bought 5 acres with money she saved working as a cook. Passed it down to my mother, who passed it to me and Marcus. The weight of that history settled over Devin like a blanket. This wasn't just land. This was legacy. Generations of struggle and triumph, of fighting for something to call their own, in a country that had spent centuries trying to deny them that right. "So, when the bank took it," Sarah continued, her voice steady, but her eyes haunted, "they didn't just take property. They took my grandmother's dream, my mother's inheritance, my husband's life's work. They took history, Mr. Matthews. Black history. The kind that doesn't make it into books, but lives in the soil and the walls and the memories of the people who loved this place." Devin set down his glass, his throat suddenly tight. "I didn't know. The realtor never mentioned—" "Of course not," Naomi said sharply. "Why would they? It's just another foreclosure to them. Just another piece of property to flip for profit. They don't care about the people they're displacing." "That's not fair," Devin said, but without heat. "I'm not some wealthy developer. I'm a single father trying to build a life for my daughter. I worked construction my whole adult life, saved every penny. This land, it's not about profit for me. It's about survival." "And what do you think it is for us?" Naomi shot back. "Mama's 70 years old. Her Social Security barely covers groceries. I can work myself to death. But I'll never save enough to buy land, to give her back what was stolen. This?" She gestured to the house, the land, the fence they'd been repairing. "This is all we have. This is our survival too." Sarah raised a hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Naomi, enough." She turned to Devin. "My daughter's angry. She has every right to be. But anger won't solve this. What we have here is 2 families, both hurting, both desperate, fighting over the same lifeboat. Question is, can the lifeboat hold us both?" Devin pulled off his work gloves, thinking. His contractor's mind started working through possibilities. The house was bigger than he and Mia needed. The land was 5 acres, plenty of room. But could he really share his fresh start with strangers? Could he risk the complications, the potential conflicts? More importantly, could he look his daughter in the eye and explain why he'd kicked out a sick old woman and her daughter who had nowhere else to go? "Tell me about this place," he said finally. "Not the legal stuff. Tell me what it means to you." Sarah's eyes misted. "You see that oak tree over there? The big one by the eastern fence? Marcus proposed to me under that tree. We were 19 years old, didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. But we had dreams. We got married at the courthouse and came right back here, started building this house the next day. Took 5 years," Naomi added softly, her anger fading into something more vulnerable. "They worked on it every weekend, every vacation, every spare moment. Dad used to tell me stories while we worked on repairs. About how Mama wanted the kitchen to face east so she could watch the sunrise while she cooked breakfast. How they positioned the bedroom windows to catch the cross breeze on hot summer nights. Every decision was made with love. When Naomi was born, Sarah continued, Marcus painted her nursery yellow because we didn't know if she'd be a boy or girl. He stayed up all night, making sure every corner was perfect. When I brought her home from the hospital, he carried us both across the threshold like newlyweds, even though we'd been living here for 3 years already. Said it was a new beginning. Devin listened to these stories, feeling the weight of them settle into his bones. This wasn't just property. It was a life, a love story, a testament to what two people could build with nothing but determination and each other. What happened to Naomi's father? Devin asked. You said he died here? Naomi's voice was barely above a whisper. In his sleep? In their bedroom? I was holding his hand. Mama was singing to him, some old hymn her grandmother used to sing. He just stopped breathing, peaceful, like he was waiting for the song to end before he let go. I buried him under that oak tree, Sarah said, where he proposed, where he told me he'd love me forever. The funeral home said we needed to use the cemetery, but I paid them extra to let me keep him here. Told them I didn't care what the law said. My husband was going to rest on the land he loved. Devin's vision blurred. He thought of Claire, of how hard it had been to leave her grave behind when they moved. How many times had he driven back to that cemetery just to sit with her? How many conversations had he had with a headstone because he wasn't ready to let go? So you see, Sarah said, her voice breaking for the first time, when you ask me to leave, you're not just asking me to give up a house, you're asking me to leave my husband, to abandon the only place I've ever felt whole. And I can't do that, Mr. Matthews. I'd rather die here than walk away. The silence that followed was profound. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for Devin's response. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. I need to bring Mia back. Let her see this place properly. Let her understand what's at stake. She deserves to be part of this decision. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Thank you for that. For not just deciding without her. Marcus always said that children know more about what's right than adults do. They haven't learned to compromise their hearts yet. As Devin drove away, he caught sight of Naomi in his rearview mirror. She'd returned to working on the fence, her movements mechanical, exhausted. A young woman who'd given up her dreams to care for her mother, who worked herself to the bone just to survive, who loved fiercely and without reservation. He thought about his own daughter, about the lessons he was teaching her through his actions. What would it say if he chose his own comfort over compassion? What would it say if he didn't? What would you do if you were Devin? Would you have helped or asked them to leave? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. Devin brought Mia back on a Saturday morning, the truck bed loaded with lumber and supplies he'd bought on credit, a decision that made his stomach churn but felt necessary. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. Mia's eyes went wide as they pulled up. It's beautiful, Daddy. And it was. In the morning light, with the gardens Sarah tended and the repairs Naomi had made, the property looked like it could be a home. Not just his home, or theirs, but something bigger. Sarah and Naomi were waiting on the porch, uncertainty written across their faces. Devin climbed out, helping Mia down from her booster seat. I've been thinking, he said without preamble, about what you said, about lifeboats and survival. And I think maybe you're right. Maybe the boat can hold us all. Hope flickered in Naomi's eyes, but she kept her expression guarded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I have a proposal. The house is 2,400 square feet with 4 bedrooms. That's more than Mia and I need. The land is 5 acres, which is more than enough for multiple families. You've already been maintaining it, improving it. You know this place in ways I never will." "Devin," Sarah began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I'm proposing we share it, legally. I'll keep the deed in my name for now, but we draw up an agreement, something fair that protects everyone. You continue living here, helping maintain the property. I'll handle the major renovations and improvements. We split the utilities, the taxes, make it a real partnership." "Why would you do that?" Naomi asked, suspicion and hope warring in her voice. "What do you get out of it? Honestly? Help. Community. A chance to teach my daughter that compassion isn't weakness." Devin crouched down to Mia's level. "Baby girl, what do you think? Can we share our new home with Miss Sarah and Miss Naomi?" Mia looked at the 2 women, then back at her father. "Will Miss Sarah make more of those cookies?" Despite everything, everyone laughed. Sarah wiped her eyes. "Sweetheart, I'll make you cookies every single day, if you want." "Then yes," Mia declared with the simple certainty of childhood. "We should share." The next few hours were spent planning, discussing, negotiating. Devin sketched out ideas for dividing the house. Separate living spaces, but shared common areas. Naomi contributed ideas with the insight of someone who'd grown up in the house, who knew every quirk and possibility. Sarah provided history and context, explaining why certain things were the way they were. It wasn't easy. They disagreed about costs, about responsibilities, about a dozen small details that threatened to derail the fragile agreement. But they worked through it, finding compromises that left everyone feeling heard, if not entirely satisfied. By late afternoon, they'd hammered out the basics. Devin would invest in major renovations, new roof, updated electrical, proper insulation. Sarah and Naomi would handle day-to-day maintenance and help with labor where they could. The property would be divided. The house would be shared with separate spaces, but the land would be managed communally. "I want one more thing," Sarah said as they finalized the agreement. "I want my husband's name on something permanent. A marker, a plaque, something that says Marcus Washington built this place with his own 2 hands. That he mattered. That he was here." "Done," Devin agreed without hesitation. "We'll make it part of the front entrance, then everyone who comes here will know this was his house first." As the sun began to set, Mia asked if she could see the oak tree where Mr. Marcus was buried. Sarah led her over, telling stories about the man who'd built this place, who'd loved this land, who'd made it possible for any of them to be standing there at all. But just as peace seemed within reach, Naomi's phone rang. She answered, her expression changing from cautious hope to shock, to something Devin couldn't quite read. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. "That was my father's brother," she said, her voice hollow. "My uncle. He says my father might be alive." The words dropped like a bomb into the fragile peace they'd built. Sarah's knees buckled, and Devin caught her before she fell. "What?" Sarah gasped. "What did you say?" "He's been searching for us," Naomi continued, tears streaming down her face. "He's alive. Daddy's alive. And he's looking for us." Everything Devin thought he knew shattered in that moment, replaced by a single, terrible question. What had they all just agreed to? And how was truth about to change everything? The next 48 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, frantic research, and emotions too complicated to name. Devin watched as Sarah oscillated between desperate hope and protective skepticism, as Naomi tried to piece together a puzzle that didn't make sense. Marcus Washington had died. There had been a death certificate, a funeral, a burial. Sarah had held his hand as he took his last breath. They'd both been there. Except apparently, they hadn't. The uncle, Paul Washington, arrived on Monday evening, a weathered man in his 60s with Marcus's eyes and a folder full of documents that made Devin's head spin. They gathered in the living room that had become a strange, neutral ground between Devin's claim and Sarah's history. "I don't understand how this is possible," Sarah kept saying, her hands trembling around the cup of tea Devin had made her. "I buried my husband. I mourned him. How can he be alive?" Paul's expression was grave, sympathetic. "Because the man you buried wasn't Marcus." The silence that followed was absolute. "It was John Turner," Paul continued, opening the folder. "Homeless man who'd been living rough in town. About Marcus's age, similar build. He collapsed outside the hospital the same day Marcus was admitted for what they thought was his final decline." "This is insane," Naomi whispered. "You're saying they mixed up two patients?" "I'm saying there was a catastrophic administrative error. John Turner was brought in unconscious with no ID. Marcus had been admitted under his own name. But somewhere in the chaos of the ER, staff shortage, computer system crash, their records got crossed. John Turner was listed as Marcus Washington. When he died a few hours later, they told us it was Marcus," Sarah finished, her voice breaking. "They brought us to a room. The man he looked so much like him. The cancer had changed him so much already. I thought—" Her sobs cut off the words. Devin felt like he was watching a nightmare unfold. "Where is Marcus now?" Paul's expression shifted to something harder. "That's the complicated part. When the error was discovered, about a week after the funeral, the hospital panicked. They'd already released the body to you, Sarah. They'd already filed the death certificate. Instead of admitting their mistake and dealing with the legal consequences, they covered it up." "They did what?" Devin's voice was sharp with anger. Marcus was alive, but barely. The cancer was still terminal. They had him transferred to a long-term care facility under a John Doe admission. Said they'd lost his records. By the time I figured out what happened, and I've spent 3 years digging, hiring lawyers, fighting the system, Marcus had been moved 3 times, each time losing more of his identity, more of his records. "Where is he?" Naomi demanded, on her feet now. "Where's my father?" "County care facility, 40 miles north. He's—" Paul paused, choosing his words carefully. "The cancer is still terminal. He's held on far longer than anyone expected. But Naomi, Sarah, he's not the man you remember. The disease, the confusion, the trauma of waking up and being told his family had buried him and disappeared. It's taken a toll." Sarah stood on shaking legs. "Take me to him. Right now. Take me to my husband." "There's more you need to know," Paul said gently. "Marcus thinks you abandoned him. He thinks you held a funeral and moved on with your lives. The facility staff, they didn't know any better. They just know he's a John Doe with no family, no visitors. He's angry, Sarah. Hurt, confused." The complexity of the situation crashed over Devin like a wave. This wasn't a simple reunion. This was trauma layered on trauma, mistakes compounded by cover-ups, a man who'd lost 3 years thinking his family had forsaken him. I need to go, Sarah said, her voice stronger now. I need to see him. Whatever state he's in, whatever he thinks, he's my husband. I made vows. Devin found himself speaking before he'd fully thought it through. I'll drive you, all of you. We'll go together. The drive to the care facility was tense and silent. Mia had stayed behind with a neighbor, oblivious to the magnitude of what was unfolding. When they arrived, the building was depressingly institutional. Pale green walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic barely covering other, less pleasant odors. Marcus Washington was in room 237. Paul knocked gently before opening the door. The man in the bed was a shadow of the person in the photos Sarah had shown Devin. Cancer and time and grief had whittled him down to almost nothing. But his eyes, those were alive, burning with an emotion Devin recognized. Rage, the kind born from betrayal. What do you want? Marcus's voice was a rasp, hostile. Then he saw Sarah, and the anger transformed into something worse. Pain. You. Why are you here? Come to make sure I'm really dying this time. Marcus, Sarah breathed, moving toward the bed. Baby, we thought you were dead. We buried someone we thought was you. We mourned you. Liar. The word was venom. They told me. You had the funeral and left. Sold the house, took Naomi and disappeared. I asked about you every day, and no one knew where you'd gone. Daddy? Naomi's voice cracked. Daddy, we didn't leave. We never left the house. We've been there the whole time. We thought you were buried under the oak tree. The information seemed to short-circuit Marcus's anger. You. What? Paul stepped forward, explaining the mix-up, the hospital's cover-up, his 3-year search. With each revelation, Marcus's expression shifted. From anger to confusion to a grief so profound, it made Devin's own loss feel small. 3 years? Marcus whispered. 3 years, I thought you'd abandoned me. 3 years, I died a little more each day. Not from the cancer, but from believing my family didn't love me enough to stay. Sarah was at his bedside now, holding his skeletal hand. I love you. I've loved you since we were 19 years old. I've loved you every day, even when I thought you were gone. The house? Marcus? They foreclosed on the house, but we didn't leave. We couldn't. You're buried there. Or I thought you were. The reunion that followed was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Marcus was dying. That much was clear. The doctors gave him weeks, maybe a month. But he was alive now, and Sarah and Naomi could say the goodbyes they'd been denied 3 years ago. Devin stood back, giving them privacy, feeling like an intruder on this intimate moment. But then Marcus's eyes found him. Who are you? Marcus asked, his voice weak but curious. I'm Devin Matthews. I bought your land from the bank after the foreclosure. He expected anger, accusations. Instead, Marcus studied him with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so frail. And you're here because? Because your wife and daughter have been living there. Because I found them when I came to take possession. Because... Devin paused, searching for the right words. Because I couldn't bring myself to make them leave. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. You let them stay? We made an agreement to share the property, to build something together. Marcus's eyes closed, tears leaking from the corners. You showed my family mercy when you didn't have to. when it cost you something. That's rare. That's... He struggled for breath. That's the kind of man I'd want caring for my land. Marcus, don't, Sarah said. But he shook his head. Let me speak, Sarah. I don't have much time left, and I need to say this. He looked at Devon again. The land, it's yours legally. But it's theirs spiritually. It's where I lived, where I loved, where I should have died the first time. A ghost of a smile. I want you to have it. Officially. But I want you to take care of them. Can you do that? Devon's throat tightened. I'm already trying to, sir. Good. That's good. Marcus's attention shifted back to Sarah and Naomi. I need to come home. I need to see it one more time. Die where I was supposed to die, under my own roof. The doctors said it was impossible. Too risky. Marcus was too weak to transport. But Devon remembered his own wife's final days, remembered how desperately she'd wanted to be home, surrounded by familiar things. He'd been able to give her that, and he'd give Marcus the same. We'll make it happen, he said firmly, whatever it takes. It took calling in every favor he had, medical equipment transported in his truck, a hospice nurse willing to make house calls, Paul coordinating with lawyers to get temporary discharge papers. 2 days of frantic preparation, of turning the downstairs bedroom into a proper medical space while trying to make it feel like home. When they finally brought Marcus back to the farmhouse, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah had insisted on decorating. Flowers from the garden, photos on every surface, the quilt from their wedding bed draped across him. Marcus wept when he saw the oak tree. When Sarah told him about the agreement she'd made with Devon, when Naomi showed him all the repairs she'd done to honor his memory. You kept it alive, he whispered, even when you thought I was gone. You kept our dream alive. Those last weeks were sacred. Devon and Mia adjusted their lives to accommodate Marcus's presence. Mia would sit by his bedside and read to him, her child's voice bringing smiles to a dying man's face. Devon learned to change IV bags, to adjust oxygen levels, to provide the physical care that Marcus needed, while Sarah and Naomi provided the emotional sustenance. In the evenings, they'd all gather in that room. Marcus would tell stories about building the house, about the early days with Sarah, about watching Naomi grow up. Devon found himself sharing his own stories about Claire, about loss and love and learning to keep living. The boundaries between the two families blurred until they weren't two families anymore, but one. Complicated and imperfect, but real. You know what I regret most? Marcus said one night, his voice barely audible. Devon and Sarah leaned closer. That I'll never see what you all build here. The life you'll make together. You're seeing it now, Sarah said, holding his hand. This, all of us together. This is what you built, Marcus. Not just the house, the love, the community, the willingness to open our hearts even when it hurts. Marcus's eyes found Devon's. You take care of them. You hear me? Not because they need saving, but because family takes care of family. I will, Devon promised. I swear it. 3 days later, Marcus Washington died peacefully in his sleep, Sarah singing that old hymn, Naomi holding his hand, Devon and Mia keeping vigil from the doorway. This time there was no confusion, no mix-up. This time they got to say goodbye. They buried him under the oak tree where he'd always belonged. The funeral was small, just the family that had formed in those final weeks, plus Paul and a few of Marcus's old friends from town. Devin helped dig the grave, feeling the weight of the moment in every shovelful of earth. As they lowered the casket, Sarah spoke. "This land has been in my family for 3 generations. It's seen birth and death, joy and sorrow, hope and despair. Today we lay to rest the man who loved it most, who built on it with his own hands, who showed us what it means to create something lasting." She looked at Devin. "And we welcome the man who showed us that kindness isn't weakness, that sharing doesn't diminish us, that sometimes the family we choose is just as real as the family we're born into." In the months that followed, they rebuilt. Devin and Naomi worked side by side, renovating the house into something that honored Marcus's craftsmanship while making it functional for their blended family. Sarah taught Mia how to garden, how to bake, how to find peace in the simple act of nurturing growing things. Slowly, the property transformed from a battleground of competing claims into genuine home. Devin installed the plaque Sarah had requested, bronze letters mounted by the front door. Marcus Washington built this house with love, 1985 to 1990. His hands shaped every board. His heart shaped every life that passed through these doors. One evening, nearly 6 months after Marcus's death, Devin and Sarah sat on the porch watching Naomi teach Mia how to fix a fence post. The girl was laughing, her earlier grief slowly healing, and Naomi's smile was genuine, not the guarded expression she'd worn when they first met. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, "for giving us a chance, for seeing us as people instead of problems." Devin shook his head. "You gave me something too, a reminder that home isn't just a place, it's people. It's choosing to show up even when it's hard. It's—" He paused, finding the words. "It's learning that there's enough grace in the world for all of us, if we're willing to share it." "Marcus would have liked you," Sarah said, smiling through tears. "He always said the measure of a man isn't what he has, but what he's willing to give away." As the sun set over the land that had caused so much conflict and ultimately brought them together, Devin felt something he hadn't felt since Claire died. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. He'd come here looking for a fresh start, for a way to build a future for his daughter. He'd found that, but he'd found something more. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by compassion, by the radical act of seeing another person's humanity and refusing to look away. Mia ran up to the porch, breathless and excited. "Daddy, Miss Naomi says I did it perfect. The fence post is strong now." "That's because you're strong," he said, pulling her into a hug. "Strong and brave and kind, just like your mama." "Just like all of us," Sarah added, pulling both Mia and Devin into her embrace. Naomi joined them a moment later, and they stood there, 4 people who'd almost destroyed each other over property lines and legal rights, now bound by something far more powerful. They'd learned the hard way that redemption isn't about grand gestures or perfect solutions. It's about showing up, listening, making space for another person's pain alongside your own. It's about recognizing that sometimes the thing you think you're fighting for isn't as important as the person you're fighting against. Devin looked out at the 5 acres that had become so much more than land. He saw Marcus's dream, Sarah's legacy, Naomi's future, and Mia's playground. He saw possibility and hope and the messy, beautiful reality of people choosing love over convenience. "We should plant something," he said suddenly. "A tree. Something that will grow with us, outlast us. So that someday, long after we're gone, someone will stand in its shade and know that people loved each other here. Sarah's smile was radiant. A family tree? Literally, Naomi laughed. Can I help pick it? Mia asked. We'll all pick it together, Devin said. That's what families do. As darkness fell and they moved inside, to the kitchen where Sarah was teaching Devin her grandmother's recipes, to the living room where Naomi and Mia played checkers, to the home they'd built not from boards and nails, but from mercy and second chances, Devin sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. He'd come here looking for land. He'd found family. He'd come here looking to build a house. He'd found a home, and in the process, he'd learned the most important lesson of all, that the best things in life can't be owned or purchased. They can only be shared, nurtured, and passed on to those who come after. The land would endure, the house would stand. But the love they'd built, that was eternal. If this story touched your heart, we want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between what's legally yours and what's morally right? Have you ever been shown unexpected mercy when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who's facing an impossible choice. And if you believe in second chances, in the power of compassion to transform lives, in the radical act of choosing humanity over convenience, hit that subscribe button. Join our community of people who believe that the best stories aren't about perfect people making easy choices, but about flawed people choosing love even when it costs them something. Because at the end of the day, we're all just looking for a place to belong. And sometimes, the family we need is waiting on the other side of mercy. Subscribe now for more stories that will challenge your heart, inspire your soul, and remind you that kindness is never wasted.